Hello. Hello. Yes. Okay. So thanks for staying here. So first time that I met Will, this is going to sound the same as previous. It was in London, but it wasn't in 2014. It was in 2011. Nice thing was that when we were discussing what we were going to see, with who we were going to talk. I was new to Alfresco, and all my colleagues said, "We have to go and see Will Abson. He's really master of chair and all that stuff." So it was impressive to see him at that moment already with all his knowledge, and it was nice to talk to him. So I know him for a while. He doesn't know me that long, but that's changing. And something also that he does, which is impressive, I just realized he does marathon kayaking, so 12 miles you did last week or something. So if you want to talk about sports with him on the coffee break, also you can do it. So please welcome Will Abson.
Thanks, Angel. Is the mic working okay? Fantastic. So, what an introduction. I've been up at a few of these conferences talking about share and how to extend the capabilities of that, and now I'm here talking about something completely different, but related. So, my role within Alfresco is I'm working on the ADF side of things at the moment. So you probably saw the presentation yesterday by Mario Romano and the guys, and we're trying to define a new set of developer infrastructure that you can use to build up your apps. So I want to talk about one key piece of that today, which maybe didn't get so much attention yesterday, so I want to do a bit of a deep dive on this because I think it's really important, regardless of whether you like Angular or not. I know that divides people. But we've got an amazing set of components if you do. Either way, you can use the Alfresco JavaScript API to power your next generation applications. So we'll talk about that a bit. So the JavaScript API is part of the Alfresco development framework, and we put the initial version of this out last year in 2016, around late summertime, I think. And this is used internally within all our Angular 2 components that we ship, and you can also build your own applications on it, as I say. Not only does this library allow you to access the content REST APIs, you can also access the activity REST APIs, the process services APIs. So you can access the whole suite of functionality. Now, Brian alluded to the fact that we're doing some work on the back end to bring them much closer together. But this is something you can use today. It's a single library, and you can use this in your applications to pull data and push data to both of those from your application. And not only can you use that in the web environment, you can also use it on the server side in Node.js. So I'm going to show some demos today that hopefully illustrate that. So the JavaScript API is shown in the architecture slide on the right-hand side there. I've shamelessly stolen this slide from Mario. I think Mario's still in the audience, so don't tell him. I'll just pretend it's mine. So you can see the different ways in which you can interact with the JS API. On the top there. Within the yellow box there, you've got the different APIs that we support. So authentication against both services, you can access content, and process, and search we added recently. So that's a new API that was added into version 5.2 of Alfresco, and that's increasingly important to using our API. So we now got support for that as well in the JS API. There's a quick code sample there. We'll see a lot more of those in a few minutes. But that's showing the different ways that you can bring the JavaScript API so it's just into your project. So it's just a single line in both cases. So how do you actually pull data? How do you actually use the API once you've got it in your project there? So I'm going to use Node here just because it's an easier environment to work with. I can do it on the command line. I started off as a command line guy, so it's nice having that familiarity back again. But most of this code you could take, I think all of this code you could take, and you could put this in a web-based project as well. So You've got an initial line there that brings in the package through Node. Who has experience? A quick show of hands using Node.js. So a good handful, not quite 50%. All right. So yeah, Node exposes modules, and the way you do it is you pull in modules from npm, which is the package registry, and once you've done that, you can write a bit of JavaScript that will know where this package is within your structure that it's pulled in. It will pull in, like Maven does, any transitive dependencies of that package as well, so it can be used, and then you can go ahead and use that. So here we're bringing in the module, and we're setting up a new instance of the Alfresco JS API. And we're going to connect to the ECM here, to the content services server. Then we actually want to do a login. So we've got our famous admin user. We use out of the box. Now, JavaScript is mostly asynchronous, so this uses a promise-based system. We do support events as well through the JS API, but promises are fairly universal, so I've used those in the examples here. So this is going to cause Node to go off and make a HTTP request under the covers to the login API. And then at some point later, the server is obviously going to respond. And at that point, when it does respond, well, it could go one of two ways. It could be a negative response. We might specify the wrong username and password. The server might be down, who knows. Or it will work. So we've supplied two functions there in a standard promise-based construct. So the first one is run back. All we do is we print the login ticket that's returned back to the console. So it's a pretty dummy example. You can see hopefully how it's working there. As I mentioned, events are supported. So you can use events if you want. The documentation for that is in the GitHub project. There's a big README on the front page that has information on authentication and different ways of accessing the endpoints. And that's all on the GitHub project. There's a link to that at the end of the presentation. Now you saw in the constructor on the previous page when I set up the Alfresco JavaScript API, I had to specify the API provider, and in this case I specified ECM. I could specify BPM if I just want the login session to work against process services, or I could specify all, in which case it will do both of those two. And if the login fails for any one of those, then the whole promise will get rejected. So this requires that we have some sort of, we have the same users in both systems. Maybe we have an LDAP server sitting behind both of those systems, but we need a common user base because it will do authentication separately with both of those components in this default configuration here. So we use the login ticket method. We use the login method, and that takes the username and password and gives you a ticket back again. If you have a ticket already, maybe from some external code that you're already running, then you can pass that in here. And you can use the login ticket method to do that. If you want it validated, there's a validation API on the server to allow you to do that, which we'll use. Or you can just pass the tickets in manually as properties within the constructor, and then they won't get checked at all, but they will get used by subsequent calls against the JavaScript API. If you want to change the host name or the context of the web app, then you can do all of that. Again, that's different options to the constructor. I just showed a really basic example here. This is something that trips people up quite a bit. So who here has heard of cause? Yeah, about the same number actually. Okay, about half maybe. So cause is the cross-origin resource scheme, and that basically a web browser has security built in, And if you are running a web page on domain A, you are not allowed to make arbitrary AJAX or HTTP calls to domain B. So domain A and domain B are known as origins, and that's formed of the protocol, the hostname, and the port, not just the domain. So that's important to realise. You've got some things working on HTTP, other things working on HTTPS. They are different origins. You will not be able to communicate between those two within your browser. If you're hosting a UI on one, you won't be able to out of the box with most services access data stored on domain B. Now, fortunately, both the content services and the process services servers implement calls, which allows you to do that. I won't go into the details of that. You can talk to me in the coffee break about that if you really want to, but it's a system of headers that basically allows the server that hosts the API to authorize access from applications running on different domains. So, so we provide solutions for that, and you can turn it off in these ways that are documented on the slide here, and also in our documentation that's linked to the GitHub project. But you do have to turn that on for both content and process services if you want to use that. And for activity, for the process services side, the enterprise process services, that is only supported in I think version 1.5 we brought that in. So it won't work in older versions. I should give a mention to Getting James, so Covolution on GitHub, because he wrote this jar module for Alfresco 1, and that's amazing. It ships a web fragment inside the jar, and just a simple descriptor. Really nice use of jars to extend web XML, and it adds the configuration necessary to enable calls for content services without you having to hack your web.xml manually and then worry about that gets overwritten by the wall later on. It's a nice example and really easy to drop in. I recommend you looking at that if you're on version 5.1 and it supports those jar modules. Csrf is another security feature that prevents people from hijacking your browser session, basically, and it does that through adding layers of security involving cookies and headers. There's two different types of Csrf. You have a stateful kind where the server remembers a unique value from when you request a web page, and then when the web page makes AJAX calls back to that, you have to pass that token back again. That's stateful because the server is remembering that token. This is actually a stateless implementation because in an API you've not requested that page up front, so that doesn't work so well. But there is nonetheless in process services, at least, there is a Csrf validator running on the server there by default. You can turn it on, but the JavaScript API will automatically work around that by adding, there's a cookie value and there's a header value, and it just makes sure that the same value, it's just an arbitrary value, is passed in both. So that shouldn't trip you up, but that's another security feature that is implemented there in process services you should be aware of. So if you can get past both of these, it's normally pretty easy. And you can get to the point where you can actually start making some API requests and doing some cool things. So I talked about the different types of APIs that you can access here. So these are the core groupings. So we have activity exposed there. So this is the enterprise activity engine. What's probably going to be of more interest is the content services stuff that's also available in the community edition. In fact, it was there first, isn't it? Community edition. So you've got core and search. There is also an authentication one, but we actually wrap that. I think you can get at the details, but generally you'd be using the core and the search, possibly also the WebScript API that we have there. So if you've got custom code running as web scripts, you can hook into those. So, we are developing the API, and we've got some really ambitious plans for that, as Thomas has just mentioned. But in the meantime, if you have existing code that does something that the REST API currently doesn't do, then you can still use that with the JavaScript API. Now then, below each of these groups, it's then broken down again. So you can imagine this as a two-layer thing. So you've got within the content services API, these are the areas that it breaks down naturally into. So you've got perhaps activities, which is your activity feed that you see and share. You've got content, so nodes basically, files and folders, custom content models are also exposed through that. And you've got sites and people. Those last three are the three most common APIs that you'll probably be using. And 90% of what we do within the ADF components touches those APIs content. And there's full documentation on the endpoints that are available here. There's a link to the bottom of the slide here. But it does then break down to each methods within each area. So, for example, if I want to create a new node, create a new folder in this case, this is the code I can use to do that. So this is just developing our basic example on a bit further. And I'm just going to create a node in company home, which is the root folder. Again, I have to use a promise to do that. So I have a function that gets executed when the folder has been created sometime later, and it just logs that to the console there. Now, what I haven't done there, I haven't put a promise, a handler if the promise is rejected. So if something goes wrong, maybe I don't have permission to create a folder in company home, it'll actually throw an error at that point. So you should really have that there, but just so it wouldn't quite fit in the slide, so I had to take it out. But you get the idea. It's exactly the same as we've done for the login component there. All right. So let's just see if we can get something going here. All right. Let's just. Created a brand new folder, nothing in it. So I'm going to do next. So creating a new Node.js npm project here. Let's call it node test. The default name version of 1.0. JS API. Those of you who haven't used Node and npm before, this is just setting up some metadata that's going to go in my package descriptor. Okay. Okay, that gives me a preview of that. Okay, so now if I do an ls, I've got this package.json file, and that's the content of it. Can that be read? You get the idea? Okay. So the next thing I want to do is I want to install the JS API. So I'm going to pull that from npm and we'll see how well the wireless is working really fast. I tried to pull a Docker image down last night and that didn't go so well, so I'm glad that worked out all right. Lots of little requests are better than one very big request, obviously. So there we go. So if I look at our package.json again there now, you see that because I specified the save flag on the end of the command, automatically added that to the dependencies in the package descriptor. So if I do npm install now without any arguments, when I've not done that before, it will automatically pull in the Alfresco JavaScript API. So let's write some code here. So Alfresco JS API. This is going to task me how well I remember what was on the slide. Okay. And I want to set up an instance of that. So we call it API, save typing. Okay, and I had to supply some parameters here. So I had to specify the provider I wanted to use. So just to make this simple, I'm going to use ECM. And I'm going to go API.login. Change that. And then this is going to return a promise, as I said, so I want to use that promise to execute a callback here. So I can then run that using Node here. So just run that Node. So that's logged into Alfresco. I'm relying on you now, Boris, to tell me when I'm running out of time, because my time is completely reset there.
You surely have time, keep that checking, but you
I can tell, you're distracting it. Keep doing it. All right, so we want to look at, let's try and look at something a bit more advanced than a thing that just logs in to the repository. So this is something that I've worked on a bit this year. Earlier this year, but I dug it out in time for BeeCon because it's out there on GitHub. We put this out on GitHub when we did a couple of the Alfresco days last year. And I thought it was quite a nice example to show to the community. So this is an example ADF app. So this has Angular components. It reuses the Angular components that we publish, and it's a custom app that's designed not to show sort of the breadth of the components and everything we can have and everything each component can do, like the demo app that we've got in the components repository does, but it actually tries to show just doing one thing, with a bit of customization to customize the UI so that users actually feel it's their app, not a default app that's come out of the box. So it's been skinned. It's got some custom models and custom processes in there, and it's using the ADF and the JS API under the covers there. So that's what it looks like. So this is a document library component, in fact, and it's got search at the top there, and it also uses some activity APIs as well. Now this is the main landing page. So it's designed for a medical practice. So if you have, say, healthcare visitors going to people's homes, the idea is that you can see a list of patients. So when someone phones the office, that person can add that patient if they're a new patient that's not registered before. And if they are an existing patient, you can then schedule an appointment with them using the drop-down on the right-hand side there, and then a health visitor will go to their home at a nominated date and time to see them. So it's quite a basic example. We've got content, we've got some tags there, and we've got process coming in. So it's trying to pull all of those together into a single cohesive app. I put in this slide because this was quite integral to the demo that we did, the Alfresco days. We coined this notion of soft wiring. This is a term that John Soteropoulos, who's my boss, came up with, and it's a way of describing the fact that we're trying to push as much of the business logic as we can and the customization into the process and the content side of things, rather than having to do all of our customization in the UI. We're utilizing custom content models and custom process models to actually, give this thing some behaviors before we even start writing the API. Maybe we can go to our users and start getting some really early feedback, just showing them the share UI of the activity UI if you're using that, and get them to start, trying out the ideas before you even start work on your UI. So get some really early feedback. But we call this soft wiring. Let's have a look at it. I've got it running on here. So I'm not logged in. Just put log out of my session. So there's two users in this system. I've got an admin user I can log in as. You see the list of patients here. If I want to create a new patient, then I can do this. Add more metadata if I want to, but that's using a form to validate that. And that's all actually, you can see by the checkbox there, the form is complete. I just need to put in the name parameters, and it's added Keith there. Now what I can do, now Keith's a user, is I can schedule an appointment. So this is going over to the process side. And then I can go to this other tab and I can say, I want to schedule an appointment on May the 18th. Then when I log out, I log in as a different user, as the health visitor. Obviously in reality you have more than one health visitor. And when I go to my visits list, we've got Keith Lewis has come up as my next appointment here. And it's given me a form to take his vital signs, which is the first step in the process here. There's quite a few fields to fill out here, so I'm not going to do that. But you get the idea. There's just those two users, and they work between them to take calls and make appointments, and then a visitor will follow up on those appointments. So if I go into share here, just going to log in as the admin user just so I've got visibility of everything here. I just want to show you how this is set up on the back end there. So we've got this site called Health Visits. I'm actually going to go in on the repository so you see the full structure. So most people will know, I suppose, that within here you've got sites and then you've got health visits. And then you've got the document library. Now, I had 3 patients, so these 3 folders each represent a patient, and there's some custom metadata that's been applied to these folders. Let's just see. I'm able to edit properties. So let's try that. Yeah, okay, so that is working. So you can see that we've got the fields. We've not applied any special formatting to these fields, but share is displaying the basic fields. that are coming from the custom content model here. And the content model was installed using the admin console. We've got some customizations running in activity as well that give us the process side of things. So that is actually, it doesn't look like much, but there was quite a lot of development went into those custom content models and the custom process models as well, as you might imagine. My slides gone. So when we wanted to set this up on a server, because John wanted to show someone this data, a demo somewhere, I can't remember with who or with what was relevant, but this needed to be set up on a new server. It was running on our development machine, and it took us a long time to re-import the content model, set up a few folders, add the process side of things as well, and yeah, there was a lot to do there. So I did an initial attempt at doing this with a curl command, a set of curl commands. I mentioned I do a bit of command line stuff, so I tried to get that working. And I've now got a newer version of that actually uses the JavaScript API. So I want to get to that, but I'm going to show the curl version first here. Okay. Who uses curl? Let's have another. Okay, more people, that's good. I'm getting better at asking relevant questions here. This is the first time I've been into the source code of the app. I didn't dive into it before, but all of the client-side code is in app here, and you see the components. So these are all Angular components. If you're interested, you could go and have a look at the source code afterwards. The link again for this project is at the slides, in the slides at the end. And that's our app, and some services as well, and some Angular stuff to structure the app. Within the scripts directory is the stuff that actually, before I get to that, I'll just point out the assets folder. So we've got BPM, we've got a zip file that you can import into, and we've got form definition as well. And then on the content side, we've got some of these files are now redundant, but the two that are used are these two zip files here. I've taken this healthcare model out of this file just so you can see that. In fact, it's defining a custom type called HC patient folder, and that's where the metadata is displayed. So what we want to do is we want to obviously take this stuff and we want to set this up on a new server. So I had this script that ran before, and this was called bootstrap.sh. So I've tried to be a good boy and put all the parameters at the top there, so you can change stuff. Is that readable at all?
Nope. If you squint and kind of imagine, you can figure out what
let me try and... okay. All right. It looks fine on my screen.
that's weird.
So there's some data there which finds what server I want to connect to, and I can override that in by passing in a command line argument. So if I've got a server running on Amazon somewhere, I can just pass in that base URL, and it'll work out what the ports are for Alfresco and activity. And going and set up the data, we've got some bash functions. So I've tried to modularize this as much as I can, make it vaguely readable, and it's just using curl to make those API requests directly. It's a bit messy because each time I'm having to send custom cookies and Csrf tokens that I mentioned you have to do, and I have to specify the username and password each time, and HTTP agents I thought I'd add in as well, and it all gets a bit messy, especially when you try and send JSON and you've got quote marks. There's some really bad code down here somewhere where I have to do one thing and pull, so I have to get a model from the server, So this is a private API here that's that it's using. What's it doing? It's updating the models. So this is after we've uploaded the custom model using the private API that that is exposed by the repository for doing that. Much better to use the public API when that's available. I should say that, because I can see David looking at me in the second row there. I'm going to get told off afterwards. But you can use private APIs, and this is an example of that. So here we've already uploaded it. Then we need to get the JSON that describes that custom model, change an attribute in it, and then send that back to the server as a post. So yeah, this is quite funky here. I'm having to expand out the results of that and do a sed, because I actually need to take, there's a wrapper around that in the JSON which I need to take off, and it's all rather horrible. So I thought, well, can't we do this a bit better with the JS API? So this is fairly similar, different syntax obviously, but we've got the same data more or less at the top. Thank you. Is that better?
Yes.
All right. So we've set in the base URL, bit of logging, set up the APIs. I'm actually, because this is a vanilla system, I have to set up 2 of these. Ideally, you do provide both of those if you already had users in both. But I'm not using LDAP here, so I've got 2 different admin users in content and process services. So sort of comes back to the point about harmonizing those things that Thomas was talking about. But for now, I have to use those separately. When I've added my users, later on, the app gets to provide us all. But when I'm bootstrapping the data, I still have to do them both separately. So I log in, and then what am I doing now? So the first thing here is to log into the process side of things. I upload the zip file and the form, basically. The content side is more interesting. So I've got a site ID. I'm going to create an admin user first of all, to match the admin user that's in process services. So then I've got the same user in both that I can log into in the UI. And then I'm going to create another user called the visitor user. You saw me log in as that. And I'm going to log out at each stage what I've done. These promises can get quite deep. There's some really great articles. I meant to get some time last night to have a look at flattening some of these chains, but this could be done much more optimally. This was more or less a straight port from the shell script, but and you get the idea, but this could look a lot more beautiful with some flattening of the promise chains and some taking some of that logic out and defining it in external functions, sort of like I've done for the shell script there. So this shows the nesting of the promises here. So it's only going to create the second person when the first person has been created, and then after it's created both of those people, it's going to go on to create the site, and then it's going to add both of those users to the site as site collaborators there. The really nice thing that I can do here is this is a script, but my package.json file, obviously this package.json is a lot bigger than the one that I showed earlier on the earlier demo, but it's exactly the same structure. We've got dependencies and things down here. We've got some scripts here, and I've extended our list of scripts. These act as our build entry points, basically. So, like you have sort of different phases in Maven that you can invoke. These are the targets that we can invoke for the life cycle of this project here that's managed by NPM. So I've defined this bootstrap script. So when I run the command, I want it to run this bootstrap.js file. can just do npm run. Oh, first thing I need to do, which I should have done before. So this is running in Docker, and I've got a content server and a process server, and there's a MySQL node there. We've got some examples that are out there using Docker Compose. I think there's actually a Compose file in the project in the home directory of this project here. But I'll show you this one here.
Is that using publicly available Docker images for Alfresco?
This one is not, but we are working on that. That's a good question. So yeah, I'll show you the Docker images that it's using. So this is internal. Well, this is an internal one. Okay. So you can see where I was playing around with this activity one last night, trying to get it to download, but it just wouldn't. This is actually a public one. I know it's sort of the wrong way round. We sort of should have had content services Docker images first, really, but it's a bigger app, and it's more important to split that up into the right parts rather than having an Uber container that just has everything in. So that there is work going on that front. It's not being primarily done by our team, but we have already provided this public image for the enterprise version of activity that you can use as an evaluation version, or whatever. But obviously that's not, you need a license to use it fully. But we are going in that direction of pushing stuff onto public channels, whereas you can see in the past we've been using private registries, which isn't so great. So this is just bringing up those 3 nodes. And the nice thing about using Docker, because this is all a Compose file, I can do Docker Compose RM. Yep, I'm going to remove all of that, and that has wiped out all 3 of those containers. So now when I do Docker Compose up, it's going to run those up again. So now we see it's creating the MySQL, the content, and then the process node as well. Okay. All right. So I'll come back to that in a second, but the idea of the JS API is that you can include it in your app really easily. You know, we saw how you can add that to a brand new Node.js project, and you saw how the healthcare app, that's a Node.js project in itself, even though actually when you run it up fully, it spins up the web server and serves stuff to you via the browser. It's all built as a Node app. Running under NPM there, and NPM manages the lifecycle. So in both of these environments, we can use the JS API and we can pull it in quite easily. I could manage to remember the code, so to do live there, so it can't be that difficult. And we can do that in both of those environments. How are we doing here? Still setting that up. So I did have another example here. I had some additional code that I was working on last night. I was going to show creating this live, but obviously we've run out of time. If you wanted to create some actual patients, this is the code that I use to do that. And this shows creating a patient of a custom node type. So this can run after the custom content models have been imported. So this is really the last missing piece. So I was going to show this live, but let's just see if we can run the first part first. being really slow. I think we're just about there. Alright, so let's try this. What's the worst that can happen? So I'm going to run the bootstrap command. It's going to run node. Okay. That failed to log into activity. It might not have finished starting up properly. I hit it too soon. There we go. Now it's logging into content services. It's created for users. We'll make that a bit bigger so you can see that. It's activated the models, and then and it's done that having created the site as well. But I don't have a. You have to believe me, it created the site. So what did I have in the other script? So you can see I was just creating a new patient called Bob Jones. I haven't run that bit yet because that was in the other script. So if I log in as well, let me just try the activity bit again. That did work, even though it errored. Alright, so there's no patients there. But if I go and run this other script, so node, what do I call this? Bootstrap patients, there we go. So I run that directly with node. So it created, I've just output the patient there into the log. Log in, just refresh the screen there. So it's created that user there. So we've got a full working app now, and I can go in and I can start scheduling appointments and things and creating new patients if I want to. But using those two scripts, which can easily be put into one, we've got a full demo environment there. So hopefully that showed how you can use the JavaScript API in different ways, and it's not just applicable for Angular projects, but it works very well in Angular projects too. Have we got any time for questions, or should we take questions over the coffee break? What do you think, Boris?
In one question, and then we go to
All right.
If anybody has a question, so raise your hand if you want to ask directly to Will, otherwise just make one. Here we have a question.
I think my question was just answered. I was wondering where I could find it. Yeah, I was just wondering where I could find this project because I'm very interested in setting it up myself so I can show it back home. But my question has just been answered, so thank you.
No other questions? Okay, so thank you very much, Will. And